Hey, welcome back to Ferrigno Freedom channel. For those of you who are returning, I'm so thankful to have you back all the time watching. For those of you who are new here, my name is Dante Ferrigno. I've been on a carnivore diet now known as the Lion Diet for a little over 3.5 years, and it has just changed everything in my life in ways that are too much that I could explain in one introduction. So I encourage you to go back and watch my very first video, 125 Days on Lion Diet. If you're not familiar with the path that I've been down that has changed so many things in my life and that has changed things in so many other people's lives, I encourage you to check it out. What I'm back for today, though, is to continue on down a path I started last week when I was covering the story with Casey and Callie Means, the two whistleblowers of Big Food and Big Pharma, who are really coming out and laying it out for the American people what has been happening to us over the past 50 to 60 years when it comes to Big Food, Big Pharma, and Big Government working together in such a way that has not been conducive for the promotion of good health in Americans. And it's spread to the rest of the world, but it seems to be at epidemic levels in the United States right now. And I think we need to be able to address these issues. Now, I personally don't like a lot of the choices that are being talked about that have to do with banning things or using force. I'm very libertarian in nature. I'm more of a big believer that the more you control things, the more bad people will be in control of the things that you want them to control, and then you won't have the control that you wanted after all. You'll have a totalitarian, dystopian state, and that's definitely not something that I want to wind up in, and I know most of you don't either. It seems like some people are starting to find it appealing, the idea of a totalitarian state controlling everything in people's lives, but I can't understand it. If you've studied history, you realize that's not the best choice. Now, this brings me around to some things that I have noticed lately. I saw RFK's speech when he came over to join Trump's team, and I didn't comment on it at the time because I really kind of watched it while I was doing other things. I was listening to it in the background, but I heard him mention Casey and Callie Means and also this new term that's come about called MAHA or MAHA. I don't know how it's pronounced by most people, but I know it means Make America Healthy Again. And I'm all for any type of movement that's going to focus on that because I've been focusing on it now for the past 3.5 years as an individual, wanting to be able to share this information of how I've been able to overcome so many health obstacles and how so many other people have been able to overcome so many health obstacles thanks to a carnivore way of eating. So I'm interested to see what it is that's being said. And I saw this video on Russell Brand's channel called I Can't Believe They Just Allowed This on TV. Now, a lot of times his titles are very gotcha type of titles, but I still like his reporting. And I'm still amazed that I watch Russell Brand for news now, because there was a time I wouldn't listen to Russell Brand for anything, because I thought he was just out of his mind. But like me, I've looked back on my life and realized where I was out of my mind, and it looks like we've both done a little growing since then. I really like what Russell Brand has been doing as far as his reporting goes. I'm not so keen on his diet, but I know he is not very keen on processed foods being a part of our diet, so I can appreciate that about him as well. I've witnessed some pretty amazing things over the past few years when it comes to people who I thought were just totally out there, who are now waking up to a lot of realities, and Russell Brand is one of those guys. So I want to see what's going on with the whole RFK thing. I wasn't too focused on what RFK was doing prior to his joining Trump's team, because to me that was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. I have never seen a situation in politics where opposing sides have come together for the good of the country, with the exception of the cronies and the elites and the one world government types, the people who are into the World Economic Forum and want to follow that idea of a 2030 agenda. Yeah, they all mass together because they really don't have any politics other than self-serving. But when I see groups of people who have different viewpoints on certain things come together for the good of the country, I thought it was truly amazing, because I've never seen anything quite like that in my life. And I know I'm going to take some flack from that on other people, but you know what? I really don't care about the flack I take anymore. I only care about speaking the truth as I see it. And I wanted to see what this video is about today. I can't believe they just allowed this on TV, and it deals with RFK Jr. and his Make America Healthy Again stance, from what I understand. So let's go ahead and get that up on the screen here, and we'll jump right into the video.
The seed oils are one of the most unhealthy ingredients that we have in foods. And seed oils, the reason they're in the foods is because they're heavily subsidized.
Is there anyone other than Bobby Kennedy that you would trust to get this kind of information into the mainstream? Surely, even the doubters and the haters have to acknowledge that what Bobby Kennedy's endorsement amounts to is the reassertion of issues into this election campaign. Free speech, end war, and health. In particular, the health of children. Bobby Kennedy has become adept at getting these issues discussed on the mainstream. Let's have a look at his conversation recently where he was able to bring that right to the forefront.
Why should people be worried about these kind of products?
The seed oils are one of the most unhealthy ingredients that we have in foods. And seed oils, the reason they're in the foods is because they're heavily subsidized. They're very, very cheap, but they are associated with all kinds of very, very serious illnesses, including body-wide inflammation.
Right.
Which affects all of our health. It's one of the worst things you can eat, and it's almost impossible to avoid. If you eat any processed food, you're going to be eating seed oil.
Right, and it's interesting the government subsidizes it. Why would the government want to subsidize something that's going to make people sick? And then in the end, we all end up paying for that in terms of healthcare costs, which are skyrocketing.
Yeah, because that is a direct result of corruption. About 75% of FDA's budget comes from regulated industry, and that means food processors and pharmaceutical industry. All of them profit from a sick population.
You know, a big item that, and by the way, it's getting very expensive, are cereals. Why is the food coloring in particular bad?
The food coloring, you see here, yellow food coloring, that is a petroleum product. Mm-hmm. It's associated with really, with depression. It's associated with autoimmune injuries and ADHD.
Yeah.
And red dye also is very bad. In Europe, these same companies are producing the same products, but they're using natural coloring. But here they can get away with it. We have about almost 1,000 chemicals that are in our food that are either outright banned in Europe or actively discouraged. So you wouldn't be able to buy this kind of stuff in Europe. You ask about why it's so cheap, why it's so ubiquitous. It's because we subsidize the worst foods. We subsidize it with about 70% of our food stamp program is to processed foods, which are all poison.
Right. One of the things that's interesting is you'll see on labels natural flavors, which is this catch-all phrase that I guess was lobbied for, but the ingredients in natural flavors are not really natural.
No. In our country, natural flavors are chemical products. So you can't trust what's on the ingredient label, and the reason for that, again, is government corruption. It's that the agency, the USDA, the FDA, have been captured by the industries they're supposed to regulate. And they all have an interest in subsidies and then in mass poisoning the American public.
Yeah, I want to talk about pesticides, and then let's talk about the policy. So let's talk about the pesticides and the things that worry you about. I mean, this looks like fresh food, right? What should I be worried about here?
Yeah, I mean, the irony is, like, for example, my wife loves kale, and she had the impression that kale is actually good for you. If it's organic, it's very good for you, but most kale and strawberries, for example, grapes, are contaminated with pesticides, and particularly the Environmental Working Group has found what they call the dirty dozen, some of the worst pesticides on these products. So, I look at a strawberry and I think, oh, this is a healthy food, but in most cases, unless it's organic, certified organic, you are getting something that's actually hurting you.
I found something recently that I didn't know Redmond was making, and it's called earth powder. Earth powder is bentonite clay, non-GMO xylitol, sea salt, peppermint essential oil, and menthol. I just want to say that earth powder has become my favorite toothpaste, and since it's made by the same company that I buy my favorite salt from, Redmond, I can definitely recommend it to you too. So if you're looking for something that's great for keeping your teeth clean and not full of all kind of chemicals and fluoride and stuff that you don't need in your body, check out Earth Powder at redmond.life, and you can use my discount code Dante, D-A-N-T-E, to save 15% on your order. Woo! I love that fresh feeling. Before we get Russell Brand's opinion about the natural products and things like that, I want to comment on a few things he said there. He was talking about how the corruption in government is a big part of the problem, and that is exactly right. It goes all the way back to Ansel Keys and the influence that was put on him by sugar and cereal making companies to make sure that the focus was on getting animal fat out of the diet, on getting away from eating natural things like meat, and getting more into focusing on how vegetables were better for you, focusing on getting seed oils into the diet, focusing on lowering cholesterol, even though these things didn't actually lower cholesterol. It all had to do with ignoring studies that proved anything wrong with those ideas and accepting only studies that fit the criteria that the sugar and cereal companies wanted him to be able to follow. That was what allowed the money to flow into his research and allowed him to use his research to gain prestige within the community and to take a strong stance on that prestige, because once you emboldened yourself on one position, you can't start backpedaling after that. So even if he did have a change of conscience about what he was pursuing, he had convinced himself at some point that this was probably the way to go and refused to listen to anything alternative to that because it would hurt his standing within the professional community. So these types of corruption are usually taken on the small level by individual people making choices that are going to benefit them rather than actually forward the science that they're supposed to be supporting, because they're ignoring scientific principles. And also, when I look at stuff like these things that are on the screen right now, those grapes and strawberries, those probably don't resemble what original grapes or strawberries might have resembled 1,000 years ago, or of even just a few hundred years ago, because we've allowed for so much crossbreeding, and now with genetic modification to be able to change the fruits and vegetables from their natural state to a state that's more appealing to the seller, more appealing to the buyer as far as appearance, taste, resistance to pests, longevity on shelves, so many other things that are coming into play that have nothing to do with nutrition and actual health, and all have to do with making more money and making it easier for the manufacturer to have access to more money. Now, I'm not against people making money, but if you're selling food, it's better if you're probably not selling food that looks like it's nutritional and advertising it as nutritional when it's absolutely not. That's one of the reasons I've gone on a carnivore way of eating, is that so much has been changed within the vegetable and fruit world that I don't think there is any natural, organic fruits and vegetables available these days. And if you look at some of the ancient versions of the way, say, carrots looked compared to the way they look now, or ancient wheat compared to the way it looks now, ancient bananas, some things didn't even exist. Like broccoli is completely made up as far as a vegetable goes. It wasn't something that occurred naturally in nature. So there's so many different things that have been changed in that area that I know were affecting me because I had leaky gut. Leaky gut is specifically related to lectins such as gluten that are in the vegetables that cause permeability in the gut. And that permeability was causing me a tremendous amount of pain that led me to try something like the Lion Diet. Well, Lion Diet has been a godsend for that. So that's my side on the fruits and vegetables part. And I know that RFK and Cali Means and Casey Means are going to be focusing on the vegetables and fruit part as being a big part of this. And I'm fine with that, because ultimately, if we could get people off of the processed food and the seed oils and the heavy amounts of sugar everybody's eating, we are going to get healthier. But for people who are compromised as much as I was, something like the carnivore diet is going to be absolutely necessary to overcome the damage that has been done by years of ultra-processed foods, seed oils, and sugar, and frankenfoods like most of the fruits and vegetables we have today, which we could probably tolerate a lot better if we weren't eating so much processed food, seed oils, and sugar. Finally, the thing that I notice when it comes to government corruption playing a huge role is that when he mentioned about this being about the children, what I think of is the fact that so many people's children are in public schools, and public schools, like hospitals, the military, and any other institution where government bureaucracy plays a role to the point that it's responsible for making sure that the diet is a certain way, that the food is a certain way, well, that corruption has led into those places things like the food pyramid, which has told us that we're supposed to eat way too many grains that are healthy for humankind, that has encouraged us to eat way too much sugar, that actually puts an emphasis on getting 10% sugar added to the food for children. I mean, it's amazing what's going on, but it's because those systems are closed to any types of food being used in there. Like, for instance, it's difficult to get a child to school with a hot meal that isn't full of processed garbage, sugar, and seed oils, because there's no way for them to keep it hot on the way there. Even reheating it, if they can have access to a microwave, is not optimal, but they typically don't have access to that microwave, at least not the experience I've had with my children in school. Being able to carry, say, a portable device that keeps the food warm for them is also frowned upon in some cases. So they practically make it impossible for kids to be able to eat healthy meals in school. They're going to have to eat those meals that they've had prepared by their parents with loving care in a way that they're not going to be as appetizing, because they're going to have sat for several hours before it was time to eat. I know I'd like to have my steak a little bit heated before I eat it, and if my son is not able to do that, it's not quite as pleasurable, and it's going to make it easy to give in to eating the foods that are available at the school as opposed to the healthy options that a good parent is trying to put in there. The fact that our military has had skyrocketing amounts of fatty liver disease going on indicates that there's something going on wrong with the food there. And I've worked in retirement homes where I see people go to the hospital with one minor illness and come out with more major problems because of, one, the sedentary condition that they're left in, unable to move, and the diet that they're fed while they're in there. So with all that said, let's continue on and see what Russell has to say about all this.
Getting something that's actually hurting him.
Natural products are natural. Food is a poison. We're being flooded with toxicity. If you have the image of a conveyor belt onto which you are plopped as a larvae top, you travel through the world, vaccinated sometimes, whether you need it or not, fed food that will make you sick, given media that's full of lies, led by a government that wants to rule and control you and hand over your individual freedom and your nation's freedom to globalist corporate powers. You remain on this conveyor belt, a blob from whom taxes can be extracted, sickness can be inserted, lies can enshroud and control you unless you awaken. My hope and prayer is that something extraordinary may be about to happen, that the world is changing fast, rapidly, and it's beginning with you. How else could it begin than with you? But the candidacy and alliance of Bobby Kennedy, I believe, represents the kind of progress that could disrupt the terrible trajectory of global corporatism. Believe you me, it's going to take a lot more than platitudes to bring down the globalist, corporatist elites that run various organizations and institutions, bureaucratic and financial, militaristic, and that employ a managerial professional class to keep us all in check, duped, lied to, banalized and controlled, sick, allergic, maltreated and malnourished. But that's just what I think. Why don't you let me know what you think?
Well, that was short-lived. So with that all being said, it's clear that he's on the interested side of helping people get healthier. And I like what RFK had to say during the speech, but I want to get back to that in another video. What I do want to say, though, is that the only thing that is really going to make a difference is when enough people on the ground level decide they're going to take their health into their own hands and start choosing not to fund these companies by buying their processed garbage, by buying the cereals that poison your children, by buying all the different things that are available in the grocery store that actually don't make you healthier. You've got to choose to spend money in areas where you're voting for things that are going to be good for you in the long run. Now, buying meat in the store may not be the most optimal choice, but I can tell you this, it's still going to get you healthy. Because the first 7 months that I did the Lion Diet, I did it all on store-bought beef. And I didn't start bringing in locally bought grass-fed beef until after those first 7 months. And even when I did that, I wasn't able to make it a full-time thing because there just wasn't enough of the premium cuts that I loved, like ribeye and New York strip steak, in a whole cow. It's not necessarily the diet for everyone, as I mentioned before. But if you're suffering from some of the things that I've suffered from, whether it was high blood pressure, GERD, leaky gut, brain fog, anxiety, depression, any of these issues that you've dealt with, or issues that other people have been able to turn around on a carnivore way of eating, everything from type 2 diabetes, they've been able to manage type 1 diabetes better, people that have been able to affect Parkinson's and various types of cancer. There are so many things that people have been able to turn around, rheumatoid arthritis, and a vast amount of autoimmune diseases that have been addressed with a carnivore way of eating. This can be something that would change your life. But the thing that's going to make the biggest difference into who's doing what is who is spending on what. The more people are buying all this junk food that are out there, the more that you're going to see this unhealthy behavior continue. Ultimately, it's going to take each person deciding for themselves that they're no longer going to put this poison in their body. Because I don't want somebody making that decision for me. I don't want government going the route of telling me what I can and can't eat. But I do want to encourage people to start looking at what's going on, reading those ingredients that are on a box, questioning what those ingredients are. Things that you might think are innocuous, like citric acid, are not as innocuous as you think. I've made videos talking about that, and I would encourage you to go back and watch some of those videos if you have no idea what I'm talking about. You've got to get serious about what you're putting in your body if you really want to be able to make a difference for your own health, but also to be able to pass that on to the youth, to be able to encourage this change, because companies are not going to be able to afford to make the garbage they're making if people are making good choices. And those companies are already fighting back against people like me by putting in bots that come onto my channel and say all kind of horrible things, encouraging other influencers to say things that are the opposite of this because they pay them big money. I'm struggling myself to be able to make a living on YouTube because YouTube doesn't seem to pay nearly as much to an influencer like myself as they do to somebody that's towing the message that's so popular out there in the mainstream today, that goes along with all the advertising of the drugs, that goes along with all the advertising of the food products. My channel goes against those things, so they're not going to be as interested in spreading the information about what I'm trying to tell you here. I've got to count on you guys to share these videos, to share the information that I'm sharing with you, to share my story and how I've been able to go from being a fat, unhealthy, unhappy person to somebody who's living his best life in his early 50s compared to the rest of his life. Because you can have it too, but we've got to be able to spread this news around if we want to maintain it. Because there are powers that be out there that want to get you off of eating good, healthy meat. They want you eating all of this stuff that they make that's so cheap and subsidized and is totally fleecing the entire country. It's criminal, in my opinion. You've got to be able to share this information with your family and friends. Otherwise, this information is just not going to get out there. It's going to continue to be marginalized and pushed aside, and now it's being actively fought against because people like RFK are putting people like Casey Means and Callie Means into the spotlight, who are pointing out the despicable ways that big food, big pharma, and big government have teamed up to totally take advantage of you, make you fatter, sicker, and unhealthier, and broke all at the same time. And I'm hoping that anybody else who's interested in seeing our children healthier, seeing yourselves healthier, seeing a world where the elderly aren't just taken advantage of for their Medicare benefits and not given any good actual health advice. I want to see a world where people are actually trying to be healthier and experiencing the benefits that come from being healthier. I just want so much for everyone to actually feel the difference that comes from getting healthy. How much better it feels to not need the foods that you see advertised on television, to not need to run out and get a McRib when it comes available, only because that is a marketing scheme that creates scarcity for something that doesn't need to have scarcity created because it's a garbage food, a food that is made to be super sweet and full of all the things that our taste buds jump at and our brain synapses get excited about, just like they do about many other drugs that make us run out and buy them. The freedom of not having those things rule over you and cause you to make choices that are more unhealthy for yourself on a regular basis. I want that for you. I want you to be able to feel good and be able to face life's difficulties without the added burden of being sick, fat, and unhealthy because of poor diet and poor lifestyle choices. But as Russell says, that's just what I think. Why don't you tell me what you think in the comments? And I appreciate you watching. I'll see you guys next time.
If we pay extra, could we maybe get some grease or fat?